Welcome to issue 1 of the Geek Shop. Today, Chetan and I are talking about zines, history, how we came about them, all that kind of stuff. So, let's take a walk to the Geek Shop. I guess welcome to the first of our topics. Is going to be zines.
Welcome.
So Chetan, I'm going to say that to me, you're sort of like one of the uncles or grandfathers of zines in Toronto, with TikTok Tom. That started as a zine, right?
Yes, it did. It started in early '90s?
Okay.
Way back.
And so why did you decide to do zines?
At that time, it was the easiest way to get a book out without publishing. For anyone to publish a professionally quality book, it would be too expensive, and they had minimum quantities, print runs, because it would be for press printing, and whether it was black and white or a color book, you're looking at minimum print run at least 2,000 to 5,000 copies. And at that time, photocopiers were around everywhere.
Yeah. So what did you know about zines before you started doing a zine, or how did you learn about this thing?
Oh, zines! I've seen them for years and years. As a teenager, seen not even honestly, I don't remember much of comic zines, but I do remember seeing music ones and various other zines around in the used record shops, clothing stores, and things like that. So I just remember seeing them everywhere.
So I actually did some history. I did some history reporting on this before we started recording. So they say that the first sort of close things to zines happened in the 1500s.
Really?
They considered them like political flyers. So it was about sort of politics and what was going on in the 1500s. So that's sort of like the earliest reporting of like that sort of thing. But the sort of more sort of sci-fi sort of, we're going to call this nerdy, but in the friendly way nerdy zine. They say the first ones happened around the 1930s and 40s.
Oh, wow. But even in the 1930s and 40s, imagine how printing it, because at that time photocopiers were around. I don't know how far back they're around, but at that time it's like, I'm thinking like ink block printing, or that type of.
Well, the 30s, like Ditto. Did they have Ditto back then? Like the Ditto machines?
I don't know, but I would assume it would be. I would assume they would be expensive.
I don't know. Like I do remember, even when I was a kid in like public school, there were some times where they didn't use photocopiers and they used the old Ditto machines.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
So like I imagine, because that technology was just ending when I was sort of going through like school, public school. So I imagine it must have been around for a while. So maybe people had access to that early on.
So wow, I did not know that history of zines.
Yeah. So, and I imagine the 1500s, it was probably like handmade, maybe block printing back then. Maybe somebody had access to block printers back then.
Now, one of the earliest comic zines I remember picking up. I remember going as a teenager going to Big Island when they were up on in Toronto. This is Toronto people. Big Island, buying Octet Nerve. Adrian Tomei's Optic Nerve. I remember buying 2 issues of those, and because I saw them and the covers just attracted my attention, and plus, black and white art, independent, photocopied. It just impressed me. Yeah, it's impressed me because it's something I wanted to do.
So I'll tell you, I have memories as a child as well of going to Big Island. And there was that other one that was next to or below Honest Ed's. It was a video rental store that also sold zines. And I remember picking up copies of TikTok Tom.
That was Seeker's bookstore, if I remember.
Seeker's, you're right. And you know what? You say Big Island for Toronto people, but it has like a reputation because I know what's his name does Scott Pilgrim. He's like he worked at Big Island for a while.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. He was one of the cashiers at Big Island for a while, apparently.
Oh, wow.
So, we would have notionally run into him.
See, my thing was when you mentioned that bookstore. Reason I knew that was because I used to go into the bookstore for looking around and stuff like that, and remember talking to the people. I don't know if they were the owners or who worked there, and Beguiling and Seekers. I remember always talking to the people at the counter, and they never hesitated. They always carried my books.
Yeah, same thing. I think the only books I ever sold were at Big Island and Seekers. I had a couple at Silver Snail, but they would just sit and rot and collect dust, and a
That's
few of
it.
the other
Yeah.
comic shops. But at Big Island, I think at Seekers I actually sold out once. Like when I was, and I had like a high school zine, and like it was bad, it was horrible. But Seekers it sold out, and I think the only fan mail I ever got from those early things when I was in high school was from people who bought them at Seekers.
And I remember a Suspect Video. I took books there also, and they sold pretty well there.
Yeah. So,
But again, it's the employees who work there also saying, they, unlike some of the mainstream comic stores, these type of stores like Seekers, Suspect Video, and Big Island, even like people working behind the counter had interest in these type of books.
yeah, I even suspect that at least one or two of them bought my books. So,
Yeah.
that was a big. So like, so I mean, we sort of know we should probably define what a zine actually is, because I think maybe there might be kids out there nowadays who have no idea what a zine actually is, like physically is. You want to talk about that?
Okay, I'm gonna show you some samples of some zines here.
Okay.
These are some zines.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, an old one, classic one.
Yeah.
And some various different size ones.
Yeah.
Now, zines are basically, we're going to use Chris's book. We're going to give a sample. Zine is you could do it in any size you want. Basically, it's photocopied. The old school way of doing it would be just photocopy it, fold it, staple it by hand. Or sometimes you have machines at the photocopiers that would do that, collate and staddle stitch and staple everything for you. Mm-hmm. Generally it's just photocopied. Nowadays you could print it on your laser printer at home, fold it by a stapler, and that's it. It's easy as that.
Okay. And as far as like content wise, I mean, early on, from what I was reading about the history of zines, like the idea of comics and zines together didn't come about till later on, because originally it was mostly just like fanzines. That's where it comes from, and the idea was that it was often like written stuff about like movies and music and things like that, right?
And that's the word I haven't heard in a long time, fanzines. Basically, that's the same thing. Yeah, because I do remember years ago, this was at one of the comic shops, I found a Batman fanzine, and it was done by a local. It wasn't done by a local a Toronto guy. It was done by someone in Alberta or something like that. And I found this Batman fanzine, and basically it's all the fans writing stories about Batman, their issues, whatever issues they liked and stuff. And one of the guys I got to know from one of the comic shop, he told me, "Hey, do you want to do a drawing for it?" And I remember myself and another friend of mine did drawings for it. And the guy actually published it in the book. And basically it was all I don't want to use the word fanboys, but basically Batman fanboys doing drawings of Batman, talking about which comics are their favorites and history of Batman and the creators and all this. And I remember it was like about 100-page photocopied zine.
Wow.
And technically that's a lot. Yeah, and basically it's a fanzine.
I think that's part of the thing about zines that sort of was historically interesting, because like when you're younger and you see like comic books and you think, well, I'm never going to be published, and you think it's sort of out of your grasp, but then when you're making a zine, it's like suddenly you have complete control, and it's sort of like taking control away from the people like Marvel and DC and all those big publishers. So maybe there's a bit of sort of like power to that.
Good thing about the zines and mini comics is what you said is 100% true. And also, it doesn't discourage you from doing your own printed work because, growing up in the, you know, you know, 80s, 90s, or even the 2000s, printing a mini comic or a comic book was super expensive.
Yeah.
Now you have print on demand. And I hate to say, a teenager me or early 20s me, I'm not going to spend $3,000, $4,000 on printed comics, where I don't know what to do because, at that time, I distribution, all that stuff was just complicated and everything. You don't want to get into that. This way, you print a couple of hundred copies, put them in your backpack, go around the stores and say, "Hey, do you want to carry my book? Do you want to carry my
Yeah.
book?" And for a couple of $100, you could have your book out at any local stores. And who knows? Like you said, someone will write you a fan letter, or someone
Yeah.
might say, "Hey, I picked up your book. I loved it."
Yeah, for sure.
It was a
Or
cost.
somebody might come to the art store where you work at and say, "Hey, I know who you are."
Yeah, that's it. And the main thing with zines is it's cost efficient way to get your work out. And like you said, you don't have to worry about editors or people saying, "Hey, do it this way, do it that way." It's all under your control.
Do you think like there's a market for zines now?
There's always market for zines. I mean,
Okay.
zines have evolved. I mean, what you see online is a new evolution of zines. It's not printed, but then again, you're a perfect example of it also, where you did your comics and you gave the option for people to print it, and you gave them a PDF to print it.
Yeah.
So that is a modern version of a zine.
I guess
So
so. Yeah.
you have two options, digital and print, and your example is perfect on that.
I think I've got a copy of it here.
Yeah, there you go. So Chris provided a PDF for people to download and gave
Yep.
instructions on how to fold it, and it's all
Yeah.
folded. Yes, that's it.
So then, yeah, it's just one piece of paper folded.
So yeah, no, zines. I hate to say it, zines will exist. I mean, if whether it's in print form or digital form, it's it's the no-name guy doing his or her own comic book, and doesn't have to worry about like you said, big publishers or spending a lot of money. And
Yeah.
modern technology wise, all you need is access to the internet, and you could upload your comic anywhere,
And
even
even
on.
Amazon, like Amazon sort of lets you do it because it does let you sell like a Kindle version
Yeah, they do.
of your
They
stuff.
do.
So to some degree, that's sort of like closer to the zine because you can buy the printed one through Amazon, but often they give you the option of doing a print or a digital version.
Yeah, and like I was saying, like for example, as have an option where someone wants to have an old school printed comic, let them print it, or send a couple of bucks to you and you print it and send it to them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of options now. The old school way, I hate to say, the only option was photocopying, and that was the cheapest way of doing it.
The advantage, though, for the old school way was that you could find all your zines in one place, easy. Like you could go to like the independent comic book shop that supported them, and there'd be like a shelf full, and you'd sort of be able to go through them. Like I don't know about you, but today I find it hard to sort of find people that are still making indie comics like that, other than through friends. Like obviously there's the group that does TikTok Tom, so there's sort of a group of us that sort of know each other. But part of the joy used to be going to like, as our case, Big Island, and there'd just be like a shelf full of these photocopy things,
That's
and you could
it.
kind of flip through them. So that's gone a little bit.
But that's, I hate to say, that's modern. The modern world. I mean, comic shops are not around as much as they were before, and the independent comic shops like Big Island and some of the other shops are still around now. Like, is there even any used record shops anymore? I
Yeah,
don't know. So,
yeah,
and I remember even clothing stores, used clothing stores. I used to take them downtown Toronto, almost any shops. I took them down and said, "Hey, do you want to carry my book?" Because you look at the crowd, you look at the store and say, "You know what? These people would like my comic."
yeah.
But here's the thing. Nowadays, you can still have that online, but, you know, for, if you have the time, you could look for it. But again, how much junk do you want to go through before you find something good, you know? And I hate to say it, you know, the sad thing is, you know, it's for zines, anything else. I appreciate everyone doing one, but there could be a lot of things that you might not like, and by the time you find it, you might get frustrated and going, how many more things do I want to look for?
Yeah.
But that's where recommendations come in, you know, and especially with social media, I've seen people recommend, you know, post images from certain things, and I'll go and look at it and say, hey, never knew about this.
It's true. It's true. Social media does sort of do connections like that you didn't have back in the day because, you know, you're sort of by yourself in a comic book shop, and I guess you had your friends that might find something, and you know, there'd always be certain, like we always have certain friends. Like I would say, Tom, our friend Tom, he buys every zine in the world,
Yes, he
and
does.
so
He does.
he's great at like, you know, he's the kind of guy who could be like, oh, you know, I bought this, you might like it and stuff like that. But on the other hand, he's now on social media and he posts about the stuff he likes, so I guess we see it
Now the
on social media.
good part of nowadays is, especially social media, is, you know, I could see a comic, let's say somewhere in India, you know, and a zine from India, and never knew it existed, you
Yeah.
know. And I hate to say, even though I've been to India, went to bookstores, I saw very little independent comics in the mainstream stores because India doesn't have, you know, much as like, you know, independent comic shops and stuff as we do. Now with social media, people could post things, and like we Chris and I had this talk earlier, where, you know, some kid down the street who has, you know, paper and a pencil can do a zine and post it on social media, and
Yeah.
that's his and that's his comic to the world now.
Yeah, it's true, and it's absolutely true, and it works the other way around. As a creator, I have people buying my stuff and downloading my stuff in, like, you know, the weirdest places. Like I'll be, you know, on one end of the earth, and there's somebody, you know, like I say, in Japan downloading my comic, and I'm like, how did you even hear about this? And things like that. So it works kind of cool for the creators in that way too. That if you sort of get in the right social media algorithm, all of a sudden you have followers that are, you know, all over the place. Like one of the things I learned about sort of publishing, I was quite happy because Amazon puts me as manga as well, as comic book.
Oh yes,
And
yes.
so I find that because of that, people are more likely, like, you know, people from Asia are more likely to sort of maybe check out my book because it's listed more under, you know, because they're more used to manga. It's like, you know, it's like the North American, the terminology matters in that case.
Well, my daughter has got me into manga, looking at stuff. If you look at my bookshelf, it's all manga in the back. That's my
Yeah.
daughter's bookshelf. You
So
know,
yeah, so
and
it,
manga is another form of mini comics and zines, basically.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the other thing about zines that I think is they're done faster, just because you don't have to. There's a lot less editorial and everything like that. But even, you know, often the artwork can be a little rougher. It doesn't have to be as sort of polished. It isn't going through as much. So a lot of you find a lot of that. So there's a lot more content, and manga is known for that. Like manga is known for these people producing like an issue every week.
Oh yeah, and that's the good part where North American wise, you know, I hate to say it, zines is like, you know, you just described it like manga because there's so many people who would be interested in it, even if
Yeah.
it's North America still has that taboo about comics.
The other thing too is the subject matter. Like when you talk about like both manga and zines, like I could find a zine about somebody doing their laundry, and same with a manga about just somebody like doing their laundry at home, like a simple basic chore. Whereas comic books are all like the superhero or big story or thing like that. Whereas like manga and zines are a little bit more sort of humanity sometimes. Like it has the option, like you can have the superhero like TikTok Tom. I mean, I wouldn't describe it as a superhero, but it's probably more in that genre, sort of like Vertigo superhero world. um, but it's on the edge. But yet I've seen zines and manga about like the most mundane things in the world, like literally
Tom,
people doing laundry.
You mentioned earlier we were talking about a manga comic that just came out about a chicken.
Yeah. And actually,
You know,
one of the best-selling manga books in the world is about a basketball team.
oh yeah, no, my daughter reads one about a soccer team.
Yeah. So, and it's not like nobody has superpowers. It's just literally
Yeah,
a
that's it.
basketball team. You know.
But
So it's like,
that's the good thing about the Asian culture is they're willing to try reading this. When we could get into a long conversation about North America and the taboo of comics. You know, that's
yeah,
comics is never going to be, you know, accepted in the mainstream in North America. It hasn't been and never will be. I hate to say it, it's the truth.
But that's the thing about zines is I think zines were a little bit of the outcry from comic book fans, even at the time, even back in the 80s and 90s. It was a bit of an outcry of like, well, I don't want comic books to be dudes in underwear fighting each other anymore. I want something
Yeah.
a little different. And I think zines might have been sort of the frustration of creators and then eventually readers sort of going, no, 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 I want something a little different. And that's how they, the publishers weren't going to do it. So people just got so frustrated to the point, and you included, got so frustrated to the point where you were just like, I'm just going to make my own thing because nobody's telling the story I want to tell.
And that's it. And also, you know what? You could do your version of a mainstream character, like say Superman. You could do your version of him or her or whatever, and you could tell unlimited stories. Do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, and also
And
back
I
in the
think
80s and
that's-
90s,
yeah.
copyright was a little bit looser too.
Oh yes, no, but even now, let's say I don't want to say this, directly, but let's say you want to do a Superman zine, you can. There's people still doing Batman zines. I've seen Superman one. I've seen a Spider-Man one. It's what, long as the publishers are not aware of it and you're not making millions of it, I don't think they care. But you know what? That's a way of saying, here's my story on this character, or here's my own version, or my own stories. There's so many options with a zine.
Yeah. And a few zines have actually sort of made it to the mainstream a little bit. I mean, I would say that Scott Pilgrim is a bit of a zine turned, sort of manga turned into like actual full-on thing. So there's been a few out there that have actually sort of ironically turned into mainstream. And even, well, Optic Nerve itself never really got mainstream, but some of the stuff that came out of it and some of the creators out of that definitely sort of became mainstream.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of artists have moved on, writers have moved on, and stuff like that. But I think it's not even a good starting point, but even now, people still, again, it's I want to call it an independence to do whatever you want.
Yeah. And today's zines, the beautiful thing is you can go to Amazon and actually print a full comic book and sell it anywhere in the world.
That's it.
So I think to some degree, Amazon has sort of flipped the switch where it's it's one of the, and there's a few other sort of print on demand type things that are sort of flipping the script on that, because the cost is no longer given to the creators, and anybody paying money is now actually like you buy it and you get it. But it's a great system. So it's I guess to some degree, print on demand is sort of the modern day zine.
It is because now like the early TikTok Tom books I printed in the last few years, they were done on print on demand. I could print one copy, or I could print 20 or 5,000 copies. There's no limitations on that. And one good thing is, I mean, unfortunately in Canada we have a disadvantage, but in the U.S. I've noticed even some of the major bookstores and stuff, they have their own print on demand like Amazon does. So there's a lot more options. I don't know about the Asian countries or European countries, but I know U.S. has a lot of options. But on the bright side, there's so many print on demands. You could do a professional quality comic, and again, you could print one book if you want to.
Print on demand is definitely the modern zine of today.
Oh, print on demand, honestly, it's changed even for, let's say, for even someone like me. For me, before, when I used to print copies and stuff like that, I had to think, how many did I sell of the last issue? And, take a guess and start printing. Well, print on demand, I hate to say it, our readers and, our readers don't care if it's print on demand, if it's first printing, second printing, no one cares about that. All they want is the material, So print on demand, it's perfect because you know what? I could print 50 copies now, 100 copies now, as I need them.
Yeah. The only thing I find is you don't, I carry around a little bit, like I actually carry copies of my books, like particularly my latest Blue Orchid. I carry around like maybe 5 or 6 copies with me all the time, just because you never know when you run into somebody who wants to buy it or a store that wants to carry it. But there is a certain amount like where you don't do that anymore with print on demand because it's sort of like, well, you can just go to Amazon and get it. And so there's a little bit of a, I think as a creator, you have to make sure that you print off a bunch of copies for yourself
Oh,
and carry them
definitely.
around with you, like in your bag with you all the time, because you never know when you're going to hit a bookshop or a person that's going to be interested in it, and you want to, rather than tell them, well, you can go on Amazon. It's so much easier just to be able to hand them a few and be like,
No, I always,
here.
that's a thing I always do. Every time I used to carry a couple of copies with me, and when I was younger, I used to have at least 20, 30 copies in my bag all the time. Because
Yeah,
you're right, you never know who you're going to run into.
yeah, for sure. It's a common thing, but it's something that I think a lot of creators don't do because I've run into people who are like book makers and zine makers and comic book artists, and you sort of go up to them and you're like, oh, what do you got? And they're like, oh, I do this book, and you say, oh, you can buy it here, 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 and it's like, you don't have a copy with you. And it's not that I need to take
Yeah.
that copy or be given that copy as a gift. Like I'm cool ordering it and whatever things like that. But I just find that just having a physical copy is like something that can make a big difference towards getting your stuff out there and keeping it with you. So that's probably a tip for anybody out there that's selling comic books.
Yeah, always have copies around because you never know. I mean, this is where I know you weren't around much when Tom and I used to go to coffee shops and stuff like that. You'd sit down and pull out your comics or start drawing. Tom and I used to sketch all the time in coffee shops, and next thing you know, someone walks by and say, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah,
And then you could pull out your comic and say, "Hey, this is my comic book."
exactly.
And a lot
Yeah,
of times you'd make a sell right away, or you give away a copy, and you got someone interested.
yeah. And what's funny? I even find that I'm starting to do, and I haven't told you this, I'm starting to do live streams of drawing my latest comic book. I did a test on YouTube the other day for the first time. And one of the things, I happen to keep a couple copies of my comic just near me because sometimes I need to look for reference for, characters and stuff. I want to take a pose from an old book or something. And while I was doing the live stream, a lot of times the questions were like, oh, what are you doing? What is this for? And I just pull out the comic sort of, I've got it on my shelf, pull it out and be like, oh, it's this book and, stuff like that. So at least they sort of see that there's a physical book in existence. And so
Yes.
it's just that idea of having it handy. And so it's the same thing. Like you're right. Like when you go out, if you're drawing, if I've got my sketchbook and I'm doing a doodle, particularly if I'm doing one of my characters, and people ask like, "What's that from?" And then just to be able to like pull out of your bag and go, "It's from this," and this is something I do. That's actually one of the reasons why I did the micro comic in the first place. Like it was so people could download it for free, but also I have like I think 300 of these, and
Yeah.
I think it was Jim Rugg that said it on Cartoonist Kayfabe, and he said your comic book is your best business card.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Definitely. I
so it's
agree.
like you can have a nice slick business card, but your comic book has everything you need. So I thought, well, what if I was to sort of do both? And so I always keep these in my pocket like business cards. And so people are like, oh, you
Actually,
do a comic. What is it? And I'm like, this is it.
it's funny you mentioned that because we're doing a show at the end of September and just outside of Toronto. And I was thinking of making a postcard business card type of thing. Then I remember what you just said. I remember watching that Jim Ruck thing, and I thought, you know what? Nope. You know what? I have my comic. If someone's interested, I'll just give them a copy. You
Exactly.
know, they
So
don't have to buy it. You know what? If they could read it and if they like it, hopefully they'll support me later on.
exactly. That's why I did like, again, I specifically wrote this story to be able to fit in this format. And I'm just like, one page is, so it's basically the way I deal with it is, one page means, if it's somebody that might be interested, I don't know, maybe they're not that into comic books, but they like my art and whatever, I'll give them one of these. If they're like passionate about comics and we're talking about comics for a while, then they get one of these.
Yeah.
And that's how it basically works. So I sort of, decide based on the conversation I'm having with them or whether or not I think they would buy other copies or whatever. If I'm not sure, they
Well,
get one of these.
I remember years ago when I was doing the mini comics, one person when I was in college, they were saying, "Why are you giving away your comics?" I go, "You know what? I'd rather give them away because you know what? Next issue they might buy. They'll come back and buy it, or
Yeah,
support me on that." And it worked because you know what? I hate to say, even with me, sometimes I'll look at a comic and go, "Oh, it's $2, for a photocopied comic, or $5 or $10." You go, But then if you buy it and you read it and you really like it, you go and support that person and buy back issues, whatever,
Yep.
and it works. You just want to. It's not one of those sales tactics where you want to, you know, catch that reader and just hopefully they'll buy all your merchandising, all that stuff. We don't have merchandising,
Yeah.
but at that time it's
He
just
says wearing a TikTok Tom T-shirt.
Oh, sorry. Yes, there you go. That's during the photocopy days we didn't have T-shirts or other trade paperbacks or anything like that. But at that time, I remember people that I did give away comics to ended up asking me, "Do you have any back issues? Do you have any older issues that I could buy from you?"
Yeah.
So that helped, because it's like you say, it's your like you and Jim Ruck say, it's your business card.
Yeah, yeah, and it works. It's a thing, and it can also lead to other things. Like I've had people get my comic and then be like, can you do this other project that we have? And so it works as just even as an artist, as a promotional tool. It's an amazing thing to have a complete story because people actually know you can pull something off on your own and do something.
And one thing I will say about doing zines and mini comics is there's no limitations. You could do a 4-page story.
Yeah.
You could do a 100-page story,
Yeah.
or you could do one flyer and that's it, or just one sheet of paper and fold it.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's no limitations to it, and that's what I love about it.
Even on a technical side, it's nice to write my comic book and not be thinking about, well, I've got to have an even number of pages and I've got to do this and I've got to fit this. Like if you're working for Marvel or DC, they're giving you a page count and that's exactly what you get as a writer. But as an indie guy, like when I'm writing my stories for Blue Orchid, I don't think about how long this issue is going to be. Like I try and keep them between 20 and 30 pages, but it's like for each issue. But like it can be anywhere between 20 and 30 pages in my mind, and that's just a number I'm making up in my head. If I wanted to do just a 5-page issue, I could, but generally the chapters. So it's nice that I can even like go a page more, a page less, and I can cut a page at the last minute. Like nobody's going to yell at me and be like, "Well, you promised you did 22 pages." So, it's from a storytelling standpoint, it gives you so much freedom.
And that's the advantage. It's like what? Again, you have lots of freedom to do what you want.
Yeah.
And not even for writing or page layouts or whatever, even drawing wise. I've seen zines that just have full splash pages or paintings, and no text or anything on it, and and it's great. It's not. Again, zines are not just for comic artists, for anyone. You could be, doing your oil paintings, mind you. Nowadays you can print it in color, which is great. And it's cost efficient also. But in the old days, it was photocopied, and the quality of art the quality of the printing wasn't there. But you could do anything.
Yeah.
And I have seen zines where it's just all text.
Yeah, well, that's like fanzines were basically mostly text.
Fanzines, that's it. Yeah.
I remember that. That was actually the thing that turned me off fanzines because I was a big comic book reader and I was sort of like I'd kind of look at a full page of text and be like, but
yeah,
I was never that into it. The subject would have to really interest me for me to get into doing reading fanzines. But comic book fanzines were like definitely a big part of my youth. And as you demonstrated by actually showing one of my old ones, I actually made them back then too. So
there you go.
I can't believe
Chris's mini.
I don't even know if I have a copy of that still.
I think I might have 2 of these, so if you want it, it's yours. I'll check.
Okay, I'll check. I definitely don't have one here with me now. I think I might have one in storage somewhere, but yeah, I think that covers zines. I don't think there's anything else. Is there anything else you think about them that?
On a feature video, we will do a video on how to create a zine.
For sure, yeah, we'll definitely get into like the physicalness. I think this is just more of a definition, and I think this is a good spot to start for our first episode because I think zines is sort of the birthplace of the indie comic things, and a lot of stuff we're going to talk about sprouts from sort of the creation of folding photocopied paper in half, and everything I learned about making comic books comes from the idea of going to a photocopier and photocopying stuff and reducing stuff and I buying a stapler that could staple in the middle of a book. Like so much of that stuff was learned from the physical, and then I've sort of evolved it towards the digital and towards being able to use printers. But a lot of those skills, I don't think I'd have the skills I have now without doing that so early on.
That's the disadvantage and advantages. The old school ways, the cut and paste, glue stick, and cropping and all that stuff. And the modern age, you're just scanning and technically doing the same thing, but on a computer now. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both.
And I think that'll be another future episode of this.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Now, if anyone watching, if they have any questions on zines or anything, throw it at us, please.
Yeah, definitely, and that would be good topics for future episodes. So we'll definitely be looking for people watching this. If you have questions about zines or making indie comics, let us know what it is for sure. So, do you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, thank you for watching our video, and leave any comments. And if you'd like to know more about our comics or anything, please check out our links. And thank you for watching us.